Hello, time to shine. Welcome back to my part 2 of my review of The Lost Supreme, The Life of Dreamgirl Florence Ballard. So the next chapter is the pursuit of false gods. So I'm just going to give you a slide. I'm just going to read the start of the chapter. So it reads as such. Berry Gordy congratulated Flo, Mary and Diana with the usual warmth when they returned to Detroit from the Dick Clark show. No longer were they the no-hit Supremes. Where Did Our Love Go had turned the group with a future. But the Supremes were hardly alone in producing a hit for Motown that year. Others included The Way You Do the Things You Do by the Temptations, You're a Wonderful One by Marvin Gaye, My Guy by Mary Wills, and It Was Like Dial a Hit, said a former Motown songwriter, just like dialing the fire department. I really like Peter's writing. He can be witty in some of his work. I find it very amusing how he puts it together. He put some of these chapters together. Let's continue. The first priority was to get their act into tip-top shape. The second was to play the major venues worldwide and to be dazzling successful at them. The third was to fight it out for group dominance. The first step took place in private, the second in front of millions, and the third behind closed doors. So I'm really pleased that I really enjoy reading this book. There's never a boring moment in this book. It's very interesting. It's well written, and Peter has done a good job. It's not the longest book, but for what you get, it's quite an interesting, entertaining read. Let's continue. The next chapter is called Supremes. It's chapter 7. It's called Supremes at the Summit. I'm just going to go through just a brief intro, and remember at the end of this review, I'm going to do a summary of my thoughts of the book and if I think it's worthy of a purchase. So the Supremes at the Summit. Once back in the States, the Supremes wouldn't get much chance for another rest break. We began to do a lot of TV work, Flo said. Ed Sullivan, Hollywood Palace, places like that. After people see you on TV, nightclub owners and the like, they will start hiring you. And the offers began to roll in. Boy, did they roll in. The Coconut Grove, the Coco Cabana. The Supremes' popularity grew, as Flo noted, as a result of their repeat appearances on national television programs. They were the guests of Steve Allen, Red Skelton, and Dean Martin, the TV icons of their time. But most important of all, it was the Ed Sullivan Show, at the time an unprecedented maker or breaker of pop acts. A former reporter for the New York Daily News, Ed Sullivan wasn't handsome. He bent too far forward, held his hands together, either behind or in front of him, or stood on stage with his arms folded. Pronounced show as shoe, blew his lines regularly and often mumbled incoherently. But TV was new and insecure at the time that the CBS executive decided that a man such as Sullivan, credentialed by the New York Daily News, an obvious solid social institution, and a former MC of some war relief performances during World War II, had the best shot at winning an audience acceptance for their national variety show. The show was a major success. So basically the chapter goes into the Supremes' performance on the Ed Sullivan Show on December the 27th, 1964. I mean, to me, it tells you enough. It does go into, it does go into their career. But other than that, there's nothing that spectacular about Supremes at the Summit. There's some interesting information. Let's move on to the next chapter. The next chapter is Room at the Top. let me just go on, just do a brief go on the first page. The year 1966 saw the Supremes in a surprising situation and locations as they toured the world. Berry Gordy had become friends with Lord and Lady Londonderry. So 1966, the Supremes came to England, where I am based. So they came to the UK. This was the first tour. I mean, Motown are no strangers to England, because my mother, she was a big fan of Motown, and she's probably in her, in her 60s. So when I was like 9 or 10 years old, I really was going through her record collection, and I found she had some Supremes records, and she also had the Four Tops, but she was really a big fan of the Four Tops. But anyway, let's get into this chapter. Berry Gordy had become friends with Lady. Yeah, I said that. Londonderry had loomed large in the British history ever since. The present Lord Londonderry is an intriguing and charming man. His second wife, Doreen Wells, was in the 1960s and early 70s the most acclaimed ballerina in Britain. That may have why Lord Londonderry was interested in entertainers in the 1960s, and why Gordy sent 3 very entertaining Supremes and their road manager to stay for more than a week at Lord and Lady Londonderry's stately home, as is known as Wynyard Park. Wynyard Park is not far from London, but in Flo's mind, they had been abandoned in the dark and dangerous English countryside. It was very spooky, Flo said. But so they were. Lord and Lady Londonderry, they looked like they were here and they weren't here. They're just the strangest looking people to me. I don't know where Berry came up with the idea for us to stay there. So basically, they were very suspicious. They wasn't that comfortable in England. And I've been to the United States, and it's a different country, but you have to adapt. But I can understand though, because they were very young at the time. They were in their early 20s. But this goes into their stay, their tour in England, their stay in England. It goes also, it states that they went to Japan. So the Supremes were really on the top of probably at the very top of their career. It can only go, as you say, what comes up must come down. But the room at the top is a decent chapter, and it as I say, it goes into the career highlights. It goes into the touring, life on tour, life on the road, and basically it goes in. There's also some references to drugs, and it states, as you can see in some of the photographs, the Supremes, some of them smoke cigarettes, but as I know, it says in here, I don't smoke marijuana. This is from, I think it's Diana Ross. I don't smoke marijuana, though the majority of people I knew do. I never tried any dope at all, and I was told when I was a child about dope. My mother really talked to me about marijuana. When I was a little girl, I never heard anything about heroin. As a matter of fact, I learned how to pronounce heroin about 3 years ago. I used to call it heroin. I basically didn't see anything wrong with smoking marijuana, but when it came down to the cocaine, heroin, and stuff like that, I got no use for you. You have to get away from me then. So that's Flo talking about her feelings on drugs. So that's another interesting snippet in this chapter from Room at the Top. Let's continue to the next chapter. So the next chapter is Struggle Among the Stars. I'm not going to read all of the chapter. I'm just going to do a brief outline of the chapter. Basically, as the Supremes became more famous, Florence's role became to diminish, and she really became disillusioned with her role in the group, and that is where really what caused the split within the group. Because Diana Ross, as you know, started a relationship with Berry Gordy. And he even fathered a daughter. He fathered a daughter with her. So his focus really was to push the other girls in the Supremes to the back. And when it comes down to it, Flo had probably the strongest voice of all the three. She had the most powerful voice of the trio. Her voice was the strongest, but really Diana Ross, as I've read in other books, had a more commercial sounding voice. So that is really the fundamental problem. She was really frustrated with, and also it goes into the time where she had a solo, and basically Berry denied her solo, because in their act she had a solo where she did a song, and really she lost that ability to do that, and that really upset her, and she started to turn to drink, and that really was, I think, Flo's downfall, because if you've read the earlier part of the book, her father was a chronic alcoholic, and maybe she inherited, the gene. I don't want to down Flo, but I'm just going on, the family history. Her father was a very was a heavy drinker, and she turned to drink because of the stress. I think the good thing about this book is it really does show you the pitfalls of show business, because you see a lot of these artists, and you don't realize the stress that's involved when you become famous. And some people just cannot handle the stress of the business, of show business, because it is very stressful. Being away from family, the flights, the travel, and living in suitcases. Not everyone really is suitable for that type of lifestyle. And really, she was becoming a problem as the chapter goes. I don't really want to spoil I'm really going to stop reading the last chapters, because I don't really want to spoil it for anybody who's thinking of buying the book. But really, the book goes into really the downfall of Flo, because when she was eventually sacked from Supremes, because really she was, as I say, ill-disciplined. Her drinking, she began to gain weight, because as you know, if you drink, it can put pounds on you if you drink. You're a heavy drinker. And she really did not have a high tolerance to alcohol. And I've read that in many books. I mean, I read this and I've got another book about Motown, which states that she really did not have that much tolerance to alcohol. And she became drunk easily. But to finish this book off, the book is, let me see. It's, as I say, it's a short book. I think it's 100. The book is 179 pages. So I do not want to spoil any more of the chapters. But all I can say to you is that if you are a fan of Motown, you're interested in the old history and the history of the Supremes, then this book gets a definite thumbs up from me. I thoroughly enjoyed the book. It's not the longest book in the world, but there's a saying, quality over quantity. So I will give this book a thumbs up, and it's highly recommended. Peter Benjaminson is a good writer. He's witty. It's witty in places. It's informative. I would definitely pick this book up if I have any interest in the old Motown and Florence Ballard. So this finishes my review of The Lost Supreme, and I definitely would recommend this book. It's worth it. You can pick this book on eBay or Amazon. Yeah. And I just want to say, rest in peace, Florence. And I hope that, anyone who's interested in can pick this book up and maybe even sample some of your music, because she had a solo album also. So this is Time to Shine Out, and I hope you enjoyed this review. I'm not a professional, but I did my best. So time to shine out, and have a very good, wherever you are in the world, have a very good morning, evening and night. Bye.